All right, here we go. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Tug Hill Commission, Region 6 of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and the Hamilton, Herkimer, Jefferson, and Lewis County Soil and Water Conservation Districts, welcome to the second to the last presentation in the virtual Black River Watershed Conference. Today, we would like to welcome Allison Connor and Emily Carter from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission into our homes and offices as they bring us Black River Dam relicensing, who is FERC, and how to get involved. Emily and Allison, please be sure to tell us a little more about yourselves as you begin your presentations. Let us know where you're joining us from. So there's only one webinar remaining in our conference. It's called Floodplain Regulations for Local Review Boards, and it'll take place right here at 3 o'clock this Thursday. And you'll find the link to register and recordings of all the webinars on our website at www.tughill.org. Today's webinar is being recorded. Will be posted on our website. You are all muted to reduce the background noise, and please use the chat box to ask us questions, and we'll answer them as time allows. I'd like to say hi to Nichelle Swisher, one of our panel members today. Hello. She's the district manager for the Lewis County Soil and Water Conservation District. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Emily. So thank you.
All right. Actually, I'm going to start.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Over to Allison.
All right. I'll take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer and Nichelle, for hosting this session. Emily and I are just pleased to be here. We are both employees with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and we are pleased to just present this session about Black River Watershed relicensings and who is FERC and how can you get involved. I am Allison Connor, and Emily will introduce herself in just a moment. I have been an outdoor recreation planner with the Commission for nearly 15 years now. I spent my first 5 years in the South Branch and have spent the last 10 years in the Mid-Atlantic Branch, which does incorporate the state of New York. I love being outside, and I often can be found spending time on rivers, especially whitewater kayaking.
And I am Emily Carter. I've been at the Commission for 17 years. I'm an environmental biologist, and I am also the Hydropower Outreach Coordinator. So I manage the Hydropower Outreach Program, educating the public and agencies and stakeholders about what we're doing today, who FERC is, and how you can get involved in the processes. I also like to spend time outdoors. I also really like to travel, at least in the before times, and hopefully soon we'll be able to get back to that.
So just a couple of items, what we're going to go over today. It is quite a bit of information, so we're going to dive right in. We do want to let you know who FERC is and what exactly we do. We'll go over some of the basics of hydropower, as well as some pertinent laws and regulations that apply to hydropower. And then we'll go a little deeper and explain FERC's hydropower program, and then bring it on home to specific projects in the Black River watershed, and then how you yourself can get involved. We do want this to be interactive, so as Jennifer said, if you have questions, post them in the chat box. We'll do our best to address them as they come up, and if not during the session, then we'll get them at the very end when we have some extra time. So our goal is to educate you on FERC, our processes, how you can find information about FERC and relicensing, as well as how you can get involved. So we have our first poll question. We're gonna have a little audience participation. And so the question is, how many of you have participated in, whoops. Okay, it's actually, have you filed comments through the Commission e-filing system? That's question 4.
There we go.
No problem. I was like, wait, I'm thrown off. Question 1, how many of you have participated in a FERC licensing? Go ahead and a couple of options, a couple of seconds, or split.
Oh, wow, okay, we're about 50-50 at this point.
Right, all right, so that's good. So most folks, or more than half of you have at least heard of FERC and have participated, so that's really great. All right, thank you so much for participating in that. All right, so a little bit about FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We are also Did I close that? I guess I closed that. Okay. Nicknames would be the Commission or FERC. It is spelled out for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We are an independent regulatory agency, and we do have 5 commissioners that are appointed by the president and are confirmed by Senate. However, currently we have 3 sitting commissioners, and there are 2 folks who have been nominated, but as we know in these times, we just don't know when things are going to happen. So their confirmation will be on down the road potentially. And the commission is supported by 12 different offices. And then the industries that FERC regulates, quite a few that we do regulate and a few that we don't. We do oversee environmental matters that are related to natural gas and hydroelectric projects. We license and inspect private, municipal, and state hydroelectric projects. Important to note here, not federal projects. So projects from TVA, Bureau of Land Management, or Army Corps of Engineers, they have their own permitting system. We ensure the safe operation and reliability of proposed and operating LNG terminals, or liquefied natural gas. We regulate the transportation of oil by pipeline, and we regulate the transmission and wholesale sales of electricity. So the things that we do not regulate would be wind, solar, and nuclear power. Fun fact. So when you think of hydropower, there are 3 types of projects that can generate electricity. The first one that you might typically think of would be a conventional project, where it uses head from a dam. Now, when I say head, typically that's an elevation loss from an upper reservoir to a lower reservoir, or it's a large volume of water. So these things both create significant rotation in the turbines to generate electricity. Water is conveyed from a reservoir through a powerhouse, and electricity is therefore generated. The second type of hydropower is a pump storage project. This one is, there is an upper reservoir and a lower reservoir, and they also have, there's an open loop system or a closed loop system. So for for a closed loop system, you have an upper reservoir that it holds water, and water from the lower reservoir is typically a reservoir. So it's replenished easily, but it's pumped back up when demand is low. And then when demand for electricity is high, that tub of water can come back down through the powerhouse and generate electricity, somewhat like a battery, how you can store water and then when you need it, you can turn it on. Whereas the closed loop system, it's like 2 bowls of water. The water goes back and forth, up and down through the pipes that's pumped back up to the top and then released to the bottom when you want to generate. And then we have hydrokinetic projects. And these are different technologies. It's a developing technology, and there are many different kinds of machines and examples that can generate electricity from ocean waves, from currents, from tides, and also through the use of a river. All right, when you think of a conventional project, these are some images that might pop into your head. Now, I want to use the chat box for any of you. If you recognize any of these projects, go ahead and type the names of those projects into the chat box. It's not a poll question, just to see if any of them come to your mind. Dams do come in all shapes and sizes. They, as you can see here, they vary. I mean, each project truly is different from one to the next. They typically will hold back water, or in the top middle picture, you can see there's a waterfall. So the elevation loss is elevation from the waterfall is what is able to allow for a project to be constructed there. There's a natural loss of elevation. And then you have on the top right picture a run of river project where whatever water is coming from upstream of the dam is the same water that is released downstream of the dam. Okay, so far we have a couple answers. Moses Saunders? No. Iroquois Dam or Mount Morris? No, those are not the ones. The 3 most common that you might know, the bottom 3 are in New York State. Bob just got Trenton. Oh, we just got Conowingo, the top left, that is from Conowingo and Muddy Run. And then the bottom left is Crescent, and the bottom right is Fisher Ferry. All right. Now, when you think of pump storage projects, you might not have a great visual concept of it. I know I didn't know it when I first came, but if you look here, there is an upper reservoir, like in the top right. I mean, it literally just looks like a saucer or a bathtub of water. Or at the bottom left, it could be a little bit more like a natural lake feature. So these are all open loop systems and where water is replenished because there is a river that is running low. So water gets pumped up to that upper reservoir, and when demand is high, then the water is released down back into the river and electricity is generated. And then our marine and hydrokinetic projects. Now, again, we said this is a new and developing technology. These come in all shapes and sizes as well. You can have turbine systems, you can have up and down motions, you can have side to side motions, as well as pump motions. And again, these can be on the river or the ocean bottom floor. They can be in the water column, or they can be on the surface of the water. So all kinds of variations for marine and hydrokinetic projects. This is an image that can visually help you see how many hydroelectric projects there are across the whole US. Now, the black dots are the federal hydropower projects. So again, the BLM or TVA or Corps of Engineer dams, and there's about 200 of those, and they are often much larger than the dams that the commission regulates. We have about 2,500 dams within our jurisdiction, and they tend to be much smaller in size, but with the red dots, you can see those. And they tend to be in much more mountainous areas where you can have a natural elevation loss. In total, the US generating capacity is over 99,000 megawatts, and FERC regulates just over half, about 56,000 megawatts. So it's quite a bit of generation and regulation. All right, now we're bringing it just a little bit closer to home and wanted to give you all an image of New York State and a representation of various authorizations from FERC that have that exist currently, that whether they're a license or an exemption. Now this is, again, kind of the overview, so not every single project is listed, and but you can definitely get an idea of how many projects there are across the state of New York. And then we have a list of all the active licenses and exemptions in the Black River watershed. And now that includes the Black River, the Moose River, the Beaver River, Deer River, as well as Otter Creek. There's quite a bit going on in the Black River watershed for you all to just to be familiar with and to understand. So I understand that it can be a little bit overwhelming, but this information is available on our website. And then we are bringing it in even closer, just zooming in specifically into the Black River watershed. And this will let you see exactly, where the different projects are. As you can see, Watertown, kind of up in the top left corner, Black River, Carthage Paper Makers Mill, just several different projects here in New York. And a little bit later, I'm going to take you to where you can find this through the FERC.gov website. Great question. The difference between the colors and shapes. The squares are exemptions and the circles are active licenses. And on the website, I'll show you, there's a little bit of a key. I just did not include it here, but excellent question.
And with that, we'll see if everyone is paying attention. We've got another poll question. This one is another little trivia question for you. So which project in the Black River watershed, of these that we listed, there's 25, which project has the most developments? So I think Allison covered, there's a project, and then within that project is the development. So a project might have one development or it might have multiple. So it could have multiple dams. So which project? Got a couple different options. We've got the Black River, the Beaver River, and the Beaver Falls project. Give it a couple more seconds to see. And it looks like, wow, Black River and Beaver River, you guys are close. So it is the Beaver River. It has 8 developments, and the Black River is close behind, but it's got 5. So now that we've gone over sort of the basics, I'm going to talk more about hydropower at FERC and where FERC fits in. So as Allison mentioned, we issue licenses and exemptions to construct, operate, and maintain non-federal hydropower projects. So FERC does not own any projects, but for non-federal entities such as individuals, private companies, corporations, and municipalities, they have to come to us for authorization to construct, operate, or maintain their projects. Then we also enforce the conditions of each of those licenses and exemptions for the term of that, the life of that authorization. And we have a division that conducts dam safety environmental inspections. So where do we get our jurisdiction? Our jurisdiction comes from the Federal Power Act, which was issued in 1935. So we've been doing it for quite a while. And what the Federal Power Act states is that a commission authorization is required for any non-federal hydropower project that's located on a navigable river, located on federal lands, so lands owned by the like National Forest System lands or another federal agency. It uses surplus water from a federal dam, or it's located on non-navigable waters, which Congress's Commerce Clause jurisdiction was constructed after 1935 and is connected to the interstate power grid. So if a project meets any of those criteria, then they would have to come to FERC for an authorization. In addition to granting us jurisdiction, the FPA also has several licensing considerations and standards that we have to meet. So the first one is Section 4E of the Federal Power Act is the equal consideration standard, which states that the commission has to give equal consideration to both environmental and developmental values, and we have to balance those. So we're balancing environmental effects and resources with generation and other benefits that come from hydropower. The next licensing standard is the Comprehensive Development Standard under Section 10A, which states that the commission has to issue a license that best serves the public interest. So whatever license the commission issued, it has to be for a project that is best adapted to a comprehensive plan of use for the entire waterway. Under Section 10A of the Federal Power Act, we have to consult and consider recommendations from the state and federal fish and wildlife agencies. Under Section 10A2 of the Federal Power Act, we have to review comprehensive plans for a waterway for a particular project and check to make sure that that the license is consistent with those plans and determine if there are any conflicts. And then they're also under Section 18, the Secretaries of Interior, which by Fish and Wildlife Service, and Secretaries of Commerce, the National Marine Fisheries Service, they're able to put mandatory fishway prescriptions on a project if they determine it necessary, or reserve their authority to include a fishway prescription later in the license term. And for those mandatory prescriptions, the commission has to include them under Section 18 without modification, which is what makes them mandatory. So there's a lot in the Federal Power Act, but this is just a general overview of the kind of the main licensing standards and considerations that you come across as you're working on a FERC project. Another law that plays a big part in licensing is the National Environmental Policy Act, which was passed in 1969, and it requires any federal agency to take into account the environment when making decisions. So the main parts of the NEPA process include scoping, which is going out and determining what the scope of the project is and what the issues are, and then preparing an environmental document, whether it's an environmental assessment or environmental impact statement if there are significant impacts to the environment. That NEPA document will be issued for public comment. There are many opportunities for stakeholder involvement. And the commission staff will respond to those comments. So that NEPA document, a little more detail about that, the main components include, it'll discuss the purpose and need of the project that's being proposed and why it's necessary. a section on the affected environment, what the current baseline conditions are at the project or where the area where the project is being proposed. It'll discuss the environmental effects. So it'll go through what the applicant for the project is proposing. It'll go through any stakeholder recommendations that have been proposed and recommended. And then it'll include staff's analysis. And staff will do an independent analysis of the issues and the recommendations. And usually the document will also include staff's final recommendations on how the project should be operated and what protection, mitigation, and enhancement measures should be included. So we look at a lot of each project, as Allison mentioned, each project is different, but generally these are the issues and the resource concerns that are analyzed when we're preparing our NEPA documents. Water, so of course we look at fisheries and water quality, whether it's dissolved oxygen or fish health at the project. We'll look at water, wildlife and terrestrial resources. We'll look at aesthetics if they're, Allison showed a picture of a project that had a waterfall. So we might look at how different flows affect the aesthetics of that waterfall. We'll also look at recreation. Water is a public resource and we want to make sure the public has access to it. So we'll look to see how recreation is provided at a project. And we'll look at cultural resources, whether there are any historic or archaeological properties, or if there are any tribal concerns at a project. We'll consult with state preservation officers and tribal historic preservation officers and tribes to ensure that their concerns are met. We're balancing not just between resources, but also within resources. There might be conflicts between different recreation uses or even different environmental uses. So these are the typical issues that we'll analyze within a document. And in addition to environmental issues, as I mentioned, hydropower provides a lot of other benefits than just power. It's also a lot of times the reservoirs can be used for municipal water supply or irrigation. They might be used for flood control methods or navigation. So if there are any of those issues at a project, we'll analyze those as well and include that information in our document. And usually we do that so it's a way to encompass all the information that we've looked at. So we have a whole picture of a project when we are going forth and when the commission is making its decision on a license application. So I talked about the Federal Power Act and NEPA, but there are a lot of other policies, a lot of other federal statutes and regulations that we also have to consider. There's the Clean Water Act, and the commission cannot issue a license for a project or an exemption without receiving certification or state certifying water quality certifying agency under Section 1 under the Clean Water Act, and or if they waive that. We have to consult with the Secretaries of Interior and Commerce on endangered species that might be at a project or critical habitat. I mentioned consulting with state historic preservation officers and tribal preservation officers at under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. The Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act is the implementing regulations for Section 10J that I mentioned, recommendations from state and federal fish and wildlife agencies, as well as the Coastal Zone Management Act, Marine Mammals Protection Act, and Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. This is just a list of some of the statutes that we have to consider when working through hydropower licensing. And so the big part of this is water is a public resource, and there's multiple players with varying concerns. So there's a lot of shared decision making and balancing. We have to balance the environmental and developmental concerns, and that is what we attempt to do throughout the entire process of relicensing. So now Allison is going to talk about our program specifically and how we are organized in order to get through that licensing process.
Yeah. Yes, so as we mentioned earlier with our 5 commissioners, we're supporting the 5 commissioners through 12 different offices, and our office is the Office of Energy Projects. You go ahead. Go to the next slide.
Sorry, we had a question. Somebody asked a question about automatic trip boards. There's a question in the Q&A about automatic trip boards that are supposed to be installed on a dam, and according to agreements made when it was originally licensed, flooding, and why aren't they installed? This would alleviate flooding upstream, which affects many businesses and farms. I'm not sure the answer to that. That would be project specific. So you would want to look into that specific project there, and you could talk to we'll have information later about once a project is licensed, who to reach out to with questions, but reaching out to the Division of Hydropower Administration and Compliance to talk to them, they might have an answer. So sorry, Allison.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so here is our flow chart. You can see our 5 commission offices. Commission positions are supported by 12 different offices. And again, we are from the Office of Energy Projects, and this is where our hydropower program originates. So we'll go into that a little bit. So there are 6 branches in the Office of Energy Projects. All 6 branches regulate both hydro and gas related infrastructure. So we're going to focus on the 3 on the right. That is our Division of Hydropower Licensing, our Division of Hydropower Administration and Compliance, and then our Division of Dam Safety and Inspections. And we'll go through a little bit more in detail about those in just a moment. Okay, so a couple of key terms and authorizations to be aware of. We have 3 main types of authorizations. The first one being a preliminary permit. Now, when an applicant applies for a preliminary permit and is granted a preliminary permit, they are then at that point authorized only to do feasibility studies and pre-filing activities. And the reason someone applies for this is to maintain their priority of application or their place. It acts as a placeholder so that no one else can come in and start developing this project while you're studying to see if it would be a good opportunity to develop hydroelectric there. It does last for 4 years, and there is the option to extend for an additional 4 years. The permit does not authorize construction or operation. That is key. So our second type of authorization would be a license, and there are 2 types. There is an original or a relicense. Now, you do not have to have a preliminary permit in order to apply for an original license. Again, it's just the placeholder. So anyone at any point could submit an application for a brand new hydroelectric project. So an original project or an original license would be for a project that is not currently operating or may not even currently exist. It may need to be constructed or retrofitted. Maybe it worked 100 years ago. And a relicense is a license that is issued to a project that is currently operating. However, its current license is going to expire in the next 5 or so years. So licenses do authorize construction and operation. And also of note is that they can be issued anywhere from 30 to 50 years. And within the past few years, our default has become 40 years. Now, the 30 to 50 just depends on the amount of development and the types of issues that may be going on at that specific project. Now, exemptions, we'll just touch briefly on. If there's questions, we can address those later, but I wanted to just touch on them. There are 2 types. There is a conduit exemption as well as a 10 megawatt exemption. Now these, again, they do authorize construction and operation. And what happens is that you come in and you apply kind of like you're applying for a license, but once the exemption is issued, the applicant no longer, they are exempt from certain sections of the FPA, specifically in regards to needing to be relicensed. So there are certain conditions that have to be met for both of these to occur. And then I want to talk a little bit about project works. These are everything that is essentially needed for the project to operate. It's the complete unit of development. Now, in most cases, this will include the dams, any reservoirs, any built or constructed structures, as well as property rights and lands and waters, property rights for lands and waters that are necessary for construction, operation, and maintenance of a project. And it also includes all primary transmission lines. So this would be lines that come directly from the powerhouse that go to the first distribution line. So power is traveling in one direction only. That's how we determine a primary transmission line. Once it goes to a distribution line, there's electricity going in all different directions coming from all different places. Okay, and then we want to explain briefly what it means to have a project boundary. Now, every single project has a project boundary. This is simply a line of demarcation that encloses the lands that are necessary for operation, maintenance, and other project purposes, such as recreational access or to protect a culturally sensitive site. This is an Exhibit G, and this shows what a project boundary looks like. And we have the website link again down there that can give you a little bit more information in depth about what the project boundary and what Exhibit Gs look like. All right, so there are 4 different groups. We're getting down into the hydropower program nitty gritty. 4 different players. That would be the 3 divisions we talked about: licensing, dam safety, and administration and compliance. But a large part is also everyone else, our applicants and licensees, our local, federal, and state resource agencies, our tribes, our NGOs, and local stakeholders. So the program is a conglomeration. It takes all parts, and everyone's able to participate in different stages of a project. Now, some of the responsibilities specifically to the Division of Hydropower Licensing, or DHL, are that we as staff, we process hydropower project applications, we prepare and issue environmental documents, we address agency, tribal, and public concerns, we analyze recommendations that we have received from various agencies, tribes, and the public, and then we incorporate these environmental conditions into licenses. Now, the Division of Hydropower Licensing is organized into 6 branches geographically. We, again, Emily and I are in the Mid-Atlantic branch, the nice yellow, smaller one that is not quite Northeast, but is close. And there are 5 other branches that are split up for the projects in all of the other states. And then we have our Division of Hydropower Administration and Compliance, or DHAC as we call them. Now, DHAC is there to ensure that an applicant is complying with the conditions that have been set forth in their license. They also ensure protection and enhancement of the beneficial uses of hydropower projects. And another aspect is that they will address deviations or stakeholder concerns that they receive during the term of any license that is issued. Now, DHAC is separated into 4 different resource branches: the lands group, engineering, environmental and project review, and aquatic resources. Now, they all have multiple topics that they cover, and I won't read through all of them, but we wanted you to get an idea of what compliance deals with and how they are separated out. And then some of the activities that compliance carries out. There are 3 types. There are the reactive activities, preventive strategies, and proactive strategies. So the reactive ones are those where an applicant or a stakeholder has filed something, whether it's a mandatory compliance filing, whether it's a non-compliance filing, something that's overdue, or an amendment to the license. So DHAC in that instance would react in the sense that they would issue a letter or an order that responds to the issue that has been brought to compliance. Now, preventive strategies would include transition meetings, filing reviews, and environmental inspections. And the transition meaning it was in licensing, the license has been issued, and now they're moving into the compliance aspect of their license, and so we have a meeting. Filing review is that they are just checking different monitoring reports, periodic reports to make sure that the applicant is in compliance. And then our staff actually goes out on the ground and conducts environmental inspections to ensure that the applicants are following what is mandated in their license order. And then they also conduct proactive strategies, outreach which would include different workshops. Some of you may have attended some of these shoreline or recreation workshops. They also will conduct tribal consultation meetings, and they have created guidance documents for the public in the past. And that brings us to the Division of Dam Safety Inspections, or D2SI. This group develops and implements policies, programs, and standards for dam safety, as well as inspecting and evaluating jurisdictional projects. They're going to take action to ensure that the projects are inspected and evaluated in their design, construction, their operation, and maintenance in order to be able to protect life, health, property, and the environment, as well as assessing project compliance with the terms and conditions of licenses and exemptions. And their goal is to prevent instances like this from happening in the future. And D2SI, to make it one more level of confusing, is split up into regional offices, and they have San Francisco, Portland, Chicago, New York, Atlanta offices, as well as an office at our headquarters in Washington, DC.
So now that we've given you the background on everything, I'm going to talk about how you can best get involved. And first, I'm going to address a question about, Allison talked about the different authorizations, and we've got original projects, exemptions, and then relicenses. And there was a question on how many new hydro projects do we see? And it ebbs and flows each year. Some years, a couple years ago, Allison and I were probably working almost 50-50 on original projects. We had quite a few projects that were proposed. Many of them were being projects that were installed, a non-federal project that was being installed at an Army Corps dam. So we would have jurisdiction there over the power producing facilities, and then the Army Corps would have jurisdiction over their dam and reservoir. So a few years ago, we had quite a few of those, and our workload was about 50-50 relicensings and originals. Now we still have a few originals, but and a few exemptions that we're working on, but a lot of our workload is relicensings, and especially in New England and the Mid-Atlantic branch, there are quite a few small projects that are coming up for relicensing in the next few years, which is one of the reasons we're doing this outreach about the Black River projects, is because there are, you'll see a list later on about all the Black River projects that are going to be starting relicensing in the next couple of years. So our workload currently is more geared toward relicensings. So I don't have the exact numbers on how many new projects there are, but there definitely had been a push a few years ago for developing originals, and there's still a lot of interest, and we get a lot of preliminary permits for people who are checking feasibility. And then it just sort of depends each year on the level of which projects are deemed feasible and are ready to move forward toward a license. Now, in terms of other renewables like wind and solar, whether that affects development of new hydropower projects, it sometimes can. The biggest connection I've seen is with the development of wind power. As Allison mentioned with pumped storage can act like a battery. And so a lot of times you'll see closed loop pumped storage projects proposed in areas where there's a lot of wind, and it's an opportunity for developers to use wind power to pump the water up and then store it in an upper reservoir until that energy, that power is needed, and then they'll release it. And so they're connecting wind and sometimes solar, and using then the pump storage facility as their battery, so that since the wind is more intermittent, they can use the pump storage project to release it when they actually need the power. So that's kind of those are sort of the trends we're seeing in terms of development. And like I said, for original projects, it ebbs and flow. At the moment, we've got several preliminary permits. People are studying the feasibility of projects, but there are fewer original projects that we're working on. But in a couple years, we might have more. So when does the licensing process begin? It begins when an applicant files their notice of intent, also known as an NOI, and the pre-application document. The pre-application document is the foundation for the licensing process moving forward. And it's a document where the applicant gathers all the existing information that they can find. They don't have to conduct any studies to put together the pre-application document. Some do, but they don't have to. But it's just gathering up, it's what exists, what information do they have, And then they use that as the foundation to determine what additional information is needed, what information gaps there are. So everyone kind of starts on the same page. And so when is this filed? For a relicense, as Allison mentioned, they're issued for terms of 30 to 50 years. And so when they are getting close to expiration of their relicense, 5 to 5.5 years before it expires, that is when they would begin their the relicensing process by filing their NOI and PAD that they're planning to relicense. For originals, there is no deadline for filing, so it's just when the applicant determines that the project is feasible and they're ready to begin putting together their application and moving forward with potentially developing a project. So the one thing I want to highlight, and we're going to focus on this throughout, one of the key takeaways is to get involved in a FERC relicensing. The most important thing is to get involved early. The earlier you get involved and stay involved, the easier it is to ensure that your concerns are heard and addressed. So I'm not going to walk through some basic steps for the entire process. The first steps are pre-filing. This is the beginning of the process gathering information. It's before they file the final license application with the commission. And it begins for a relicense, which is the yellow box will send an advance notification letter to the licensee to let them know first that they have a FERC license, because some of these smaller projects, they sometimes forget. So we'll remind them that they've got a FERC license that is coming up for renewal and that they need to start thinking about whether they're going to relicense the project. And if so, they need to start putting together their pre-application document and determining what they're going to do. It's also for relicenses, that's when the commission will send out tribal consultation letters for tribes who are potentially interested in the area of that project. So that yellow box is only for relicensings. That's because for an original, there's no advance notification because we're waiting for them to tell us that they're ready to begin moving forward. So then the next box, the blue box, is for all applicants. As I mentioned, that process starts, the licensing process starts when they file their notice of intent and pre-application document. Then we begin, there are lots of opportunities from there for stakeholder involvement. So once the notice of intent and the pre-application document are filed, we begin consultation. The applicant will reach out to stakeholders and say, this is the pre-application document, this is the information we have. What other information is out there? Did we miss anything? Are there any other issues that we didn't address? So they begin consulting, and that's an opportunity for stakeholders to get involved. Through this consultation, they'll identify issues and also information gaps. So this is all the information we have. What information don't we have? And so this is another opportunity for stakeholder input. And then once those information gaps are determined, the applicants will begin gathering the information and conducting studies. And through this process, it's yet another opportunity for stakeholders to be involved and to have to provide input into the process. So once the applicant has conducted the studies to fill the information gaps that they feel are necessary to be filled, they will prepare their final license application. And once they file that final license application with the commission, we move into what we call post-filing. So we now have a proceeding before the commission. We've got a license application that says this is the project, these are the effects from the project, and this is how the applicant is proposing to operate it. So the commission will notice that application to let the public know that it has been filed with us, and we'll also ask for comments. So this is yet another opportunity for stakeholder input. The commission will review the document and make sure that we understand what is being proposed, and then we'll review the comments and make sure that we have all the information necessary for us to conduct our NEPA analysis. So we might have to go out and request additional information from the applicant. In some cases, we might even request them to conduct additional studies so that we can ensure we have all the information we need to conduct our independent analysis of the effects of that project. Once we've done that, we'll issue a notice that it's ready for environmental analysis, and we'll prepare our NEPA document. Again, that could either be an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement if there are significant effects. And that document will be issued for public comment. So that is yet another opportunity for stakeholder input into the process. Once that comment period has ended, commission staff will review the comments and make our recommendations to the commission for how the project should be operated and what measures should be included in any license, if a license should be issued, and then what measures should be included to protect, mitigate, and enhance the environment at that project. So those are the basic steps for both pre-filing, which is information gathering, and post-filing, which is moving through the FERC proceeding. And there are 3 different processes that can be used to get through both those pre-filing and post-filing steps. The first process is the ILP, which is our default process. It came about in 2003, became the default in 2005, and it works well for projects that are, they have complex issues and there are a lot of study needs. So there are a lot of players and they've got different concerns, and so a lot of information gaps and studies that need to be conducted to fill those information gaps. There's also a lot of FERC oversight in the ILP, and we are involved, FERC staff is involved heavily from the beginning. We're involved in scoping the issues, we're involved in study plan development, and FERC actually approves, FERC staff approve a study plan that tells the applicant what studies need to be conducted. So we are heavily involved, and it includes predictable scheduling, because in the regulations, it sets forth when things happen, when things get filed, when studies need to be done, and all of that. And so that's one of the benefits of the ILP, is that everyone knows what gets done in both pre-filing and post-filing. However, while that is our default, we have 2 other processes that an applicant can choose. There's the ILP as the default, and then there's the ALP, which is the alternative licensing process. This isn't used very much. It's a collaborative process. It's stakeholders work together, but FERC is not as involved in the pre-filing. But it is an option that is available for applicants to choose. Usually if an applicant doesn't go with the ILP, they request to use the TLP, the traditional licensing process. And they can request to use this alternative process when they file their NOI and PAD. FERC staff will review that request and determine whether we will grant that approval. And if so, then the TLP, the difference with the TLP is most of the differences happen during pre-filing. So it's during information gathering. As I mentioned, for the ILP, FERC staff is heavily involved in pre-filing, and there are predicted dates. In the TLP, there are no set timeframes, and it's a much more of a paper-driven process, and the applicant leads the process. So the applicant is leading consultation and conducting the studies, and then FERC usually does not get involved until post-filing. So it works best for projects that are a little less complex and maybe don't have as many study needs. So those are the 3 processes, and this is a very quick overview of some processes that can be very complex. And there's a comment in the chat box about sometimes the TLP can provide less stakeholder opportunity, and that is correct. That's in the ILP, it's written in for many different opportunities for stakeholders to provide input, and those are not as guaranteed during pre-filing, because that is a paper-driven process by the applicant. So most of the differences between the processes are at the beginning. Post-filing is very similar. The commission staff will still ensure we have all the information we need to conduct our analysis, and we'll prepare the NEPA document for comment and all. The biggest difference in post-filing is just different timeframes. So as Allison mentioned, each project is different, and really it kind of depends on the project which process fits best. That is a very quick overview, but if you would like to learn more about them, Allison will walk through and direct you to our website, but we have write-ups on our website about the different licensing processes that can give you some more in-depth information about the differences and about each process. So once you get through the process, what's the end result? The end result is a license order, hopefully. And what does the license order do? The license order, first of all, it provides background. It walks through the process and what the project is and what the project looks like, and then, you know, what the process has been moving through the licensing program. It also documents compliance with applicable requirements. I mentioned all the different statutes and regulations that we have to consider in addition to the FPA. So the license order will go through those and indicate compliance with ESA and Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, Coastal Zone Management, those different requirements. The license order also sets the license term. So that's whether it's 30, 40, or 50 years. 40 is our default, but there are reasons why they might get a 30 or a 50-year license. And the authorized capacity, so the size of the project, whether it's a megawatt or 500 megawatts. It'll define the project works and project boundary that Allison described earlier. And then it'll also include the license articles and any mandatory conditions. So the license articles indicate how the project will be operated and what protection, mitigation, and enhancement measures have to be implemented at the project, whether it's recreation management plans, historic preservation plans, or minimum flows and fish passage related issues. It'll also include mandatory conditions. So those are, for instance, the Section 18 mandatory fishway prescriptions from Interior or Commerce, or any conditions set forth in the water quality certificate from the State Water Quality Agency. So those will all be in the license order that is issued by the commission. So this slide is just kind of to wrap everything up, the general pathway to licensing. It starts with conceptual project development. So that's putting together the pad, or if it's an original project, applying for potentially a preliminary permit and determining kind of what's out there and what's feasible. And then moving into the pre-filing period, filing the pad and collecting information and sharing it and consulting to make sure you've got all the information and filled any information gaps, conducting any studies, preparing the final license application, filing it with the commission, and moving into the evaluation period, which is when commission staff is preparing the NEPA document in the post-filing before the commission finally acts on either approving or denying that license. But as I mentioned, there are many opportunities throughout the process for consultation with the stakeholders, whether it's federal agencies, state agencies, municipalities, local landowners, tribes, or non-governmental organizations. Many different opportunities to be involved. So I think we've got, just to see if everyone's paying attention, I know there's just a lot of information that was thrown out, so we've got another poll question. This one is a true false. So the ALP, the alternative licensing process, is it true or false that is the commission's default licensing process? Give a few minutes to see who was paying attention. So far, everybody. Yep, looks like everybody was paying attention. Way to go, guys. That is false. The ILP is our default process. So, told you how to get involved. Now I've got some tips for getting and staying involved. As I've mentioned, the biggest tip is to start early. The earlier you can start, you stay involved and learn about a project and have your concerns heard, the easier it is to have them addressed. So participate in pre-filing, stay informed. One of the easiest ways to stay informed about a project is to e-subscribe, which Allison will discuss in a little bit. Review filings and issuances from the commission, filings from other parties, file comments to make sure that your information that you have is on the record and that concerns you have and recommendations you have are also on the record. And then participate in meetings, study development, and work groups. Each project is different, so not all projects have working groups, but there are a lot of times with ILPs, an applicant will put together a work group for like the recreation working group or the water quality working group. And so if that is happening at a project that you're interested in, I recommend getting involved because that's when they're having discussions about studies and mitigation measures. And then once an application is filed, continue to be involved. Review the application, review the NEPA document, the EA or the EIS, file comments and recommendations. And then if you're interested, you can become an official party to the proceeding. It is not necessary, but if you wanted to become an official party, that's becoming an intervener. There's more information on our website. If you're an intervener, you do not have to be an intervener to file comments. Anyone can file comments and they will be reviewed. But if you want to be an official party and become an intervener, then when the commission issues the license order, you have an opportunity to request rehearing on that order. And by requesting rehearing, that's stating you have to explain why you're requesting rehearing, what you don't agree with in the order, and ask that the commission look it over and potentially review what the decision was and if it needs to be changed. And the only way to do that is if you're an intervener. But again, you don't have to be an intervener to file comments. Anyone can file comments. That just is the next level. So some tips for filing comments: be as clear and specific as possible and provide as much detail. You want to make sure that not only the applicant but commission staff understand what your concerns are and what your recommendations are. So the more clear that you can be and the more specific you can be, the easier it is for us to understand and address concerns. If you're recommending measures, make sure to provide support for those measures. Don't just say that you need more recreation sites. Indicate why you need more recreation sites, or that don't just say more water needs to flow past the dam, say why more water needs to flow. So make sure to provide support for any recommendations you make. Be consistent, make sure you're not making recommendations for measures that conflict, whether they're water quality measures or recreation measures, just make sure that they don't conflict. And then if you really want to do your homework, review past commission orders to see how commission has acted in past cases. And you can always ask commission staff questions. We're more than willing to assist providing guidance on things. The one caveat to this is once an application has been filed with the commission, a final license application, and we've moved into post-filing, we are bound by something called ex parte. And that's because that just means that we can't have one-on-one conversations about specifics related to a project, the merits of that project. And that's because we're trying to keep things, it is a public process and we want to be as transparent as possible. So once we actually have a final license application before us, we can't have any conversations with just one party that other parties would benefit from. So we can talk about process. Any questions about filing comments or things like that are fine. But when it comes to specifically issues related to a project, then got distracted by the comments, then we can't have those conversations. So just a couple more slides for me and then back to Allison. Settlements, some of you have probably been involved in settlements on other projects in New York, and the commission does look favorably upon them. We have a settlement policy that goes over what we would like to see in settlements, and we really do prefer them in some cases because they save time and money and they avoid litigation and they promote positive relationships among stakeholders. So we definitely look favorably upon them because we like to see that the parties that are on the ground at a site have come together and come to agreement. But when filing settlements, again, like with the comments, make sure that everything is, any measures are backed up and you provide evidence for what you're recommending. But in some cases, projects just don't make sense. And in these cases, our regulations do allow for licensees to surrender their projects. Surrenders are handled through our Division of Administration and Compliance, and they work a little bit like licensing, just the opposite. So the licensee has to, if they determine that it's not economically feasible, or there's another reason why they no longer would like to have their license, they can apply for a surrender. A lot of times it's filed in the same manner as a license application. There's consultation, there are opportunities for stakeholder involvement. And ultimately, when the commission will decide whether to surrender that license only after certain conditions are met. And there are different ways that a project can be surrendered. They might, that might involve totally decommissioning the project, but leaving it in place, or it might involve removing the project. It all depends on the project. Termination of licenses, for original projects, if it hasn't been constructed yet, then sometimes those projects will never be constructed and that license will be terminated. And then there are some projects, unfortunately, that are abandoned, and those are a little harder to condition, but we will do an implied surrender in those cases so that they can no longer operate. So if you're interested in surrenders, there's again more information on our website about those. Now, more for you guys to be interested in the Black River Watershed.
Yes. We're going to go into some project specifics as far as what is coming up. Currently, the Carthage Paper Makers Mill project is in the relicensing process. So their notice of intent and pre-application document were filed around this time of 2016. And their final license application was filed just this time last year. That leads us to their license actually expires around this time next year. So we can't talk too much about Carthage, but we wanted to bring that up. We can highlight some other projects that will be coming up in 2021. Their notice of intents and pre-application documents will be due. So we wanted to make sure that these were kind of in the forefront of your minds. So in the spring of next year, the Moose River project, the Cayuga Lake, Lionsdale, and Lyons Falls projects will each have their NOI and pads submitted to the commission by either the end of April or the end of May. And in the summertime, the Beaver River project, which we mentioned earlier, has 8 developments that will be due in July of 2021. Again, this is starting the pre-filing process. And then in the end of November of next year, the Black River and the BB Island projects will each be submitting their NOI and pads in that time. And then in 2022, we wanted to throw one more in there. Forestport will be submitting their NOI and pad. And just to keep in mind, if you just add 5 years to these dates, that will give you the expiration of the license. Because as we mentioned, Emily told us that the NOI and pad starts the pre-filing process and is anywhere from 5 to 5.5 years before the license is expiring. And then we wanted to, again, just give you the visual, and I highlighted the projects that are coming up for relicensing beginning next year. Again, Carthage Paper Makers Mill, currently in that process. And we are going to go now to the FERC website. You can either do this on your computer with me. Don't X out of Zoom, but if you want to open a browser, you have the opportunity to do that. I'm going to open up a browser. Can everyone see that? Is that looking good? The FERC.gov website. Is that good, Emily? Do you see it? Okay, perfect. So this is our home page. It has changed recently. So for those of you that are like, what website are you on? This is now our home page, and we want to take you to a couple of different places. All right, so we're here at FERC.gov. We are first going to go here to industries and data. On this left side panel, there's lots of options. The very first one is industries and data. This is important. This will take you to the hydropower page. You can see the natural gas, all the industries that we regulate. So we're coming over here to the far right. You can see the hydropower has 4 different options. We mentioned the licensing, DHAC, and dam safety. So we're going to go to the overview. I'm clicking that. And now I am going over here to where it says quick links on the far right side of the hydropower page. So when I click that, it's going to take me to the map that you've seen a couple of times already in our presentation. But I wanted to try to direct you to it so that you could find this, so that you have the opportunity to zoom in on projects that are near and dear to you and close to your areas of interest. So clicking on that link, and then you will get a couple of different tabs that are going to pop up. Some great information, some intro information, power of water, the hydropower timeline, the history of FERC. But I'm going to click here on the second to last one, the FERC projects tab. Okay. So once I've clicked on that, this is similar to the map that you saw earlier. I'm going to scroll to the bottom. On the left, I wanted to show you, here are the dots and the squares that the question was asked earlier, whereas the dots are the licenses, and it has different capacities that depend on the size. Same with the exemptions. Those are the squares, and the size will also show you how much generation is at that project. So I'm going to scroll over, try to bring New York kind of in the middle of my page. Now I'm going to hit my plus sign. I'm going to zoom on in. And you have to keep kind of moving, kind of like Google Maps. And as I zoom in, so now I see lots of dots and lots of squares. I'm going to zoom once more. Now all of the names are actually starting to come into view. So I will zoom in here around Carthage Paper Makers, so we can see the map that I had just showed you. So we see Watertown, Carthage Paper Makers. Let me zoom once more, let's see what happens. Now you start to get all of these little ones. Let's see if I can zoom once more. All right, so now you can see names of all the different dots and squares that are on here. So this is a tool, again, that you can go to on our FERC.gov website that will let you look at hydropower projects across the US. If you happen to be in other areas or interested in other areas. I'm zooming out just so you can see, again, just what it looks like, focusing mostly here on New York. Okay, so while we're here on the website, I have a second page that's open. So I'm going to go back to my home page. You can, if you're messing on your computer, you can either type FERC.gov in the browser, or you can hit the back button. So back here at the home page, again, this is what it looks like. It looks very different, but that is, it's all good. We're going down here to the left side, and we're going to go to our FERC Online tab. Now this is where all of our e-systems that you've kind of heard, e-subscription and e-filing, if you're not familiar with those, this is where you'll find information on those topics. I'm clicking FERC Online. Now here is an overview, the very first option under FERC Online. So I'm going to click there. And this will give you a brief explanation of all of our e-systems. So I'll go through them real quickly. So an let me scroll down rather. Okay. So an e-comment is similar to sending an email. You don't have to log in or subscribe or e-register. It's simply, you have something you want to say about a specific project. Typically it's pretty small, under 6,000 characters, and you just want to send it and be done. And that's fine, you have that option. That's one way. Now e-filing is if you want to file much larger documents. Our licensees are e-file. This is where they will submit their license applications. They will submit exhibits and photos or critical and energy infrastructure information. That's a tongue twister. And these are the larger filings over 6,000 characters. And in order to e-file, you must e-register. So you get an account so that you can conduct business with the commission. All right. That was e-filing. Going down to e-subscription. This is a great tool to be clued into very specific projects where you can pick and choose which ones. You simply need to know the project number. When I was going through the ones that have their NOI and PADs that are coming due, they had a P-5000. That is their project number, also known as a docket number. So when you e-subscribe, that is the number that you want to subscribe to so that you get all filings and all issuances related to that project. They will come to your inbox, and I will show you that in just one moment. I'm going to scroll down to a couple of more. E-service, this is our mailing list and service list. As Emily mentioned, being an intervener, you would be added to our mailing and service list. And if you when you e-register, you can click here, and this is where you would sign up with a user ID and a password so that you can do, you can e-file your comments. And last but not least is e-library. This is literally our library. It says over 2 million documents related to specific docketed proceedings, over 10 million pages through the FERC website. I mean, if you want some really interesting reading, I mean, if you're not sleeping well, I'd say go here, but e-library it's the catch-all. It's everything that's been issued, everything that has been filed specific to different projects and different docket numbers. And this is all of our industries, not just hydropower. Okay, so I'm going to come back to our presentation. Let's see. And this one. And of course, I'm at the beginning. Oh man, hold on one second. Sorry, you guys, I totally had it set up and I lost it. You get to see everything real fast. I totally apologize.
While Allison is pulling up that page, I'll also address, there was a comment about decommissioning as an option instead of relicensing. And That is a possibility. There are licensees who determine instead of relicensing, they would like to decommission their project. It is up to the licensee to make that determination, but hopefully they are making it in concert with consultation with agencies and other stakeholders. So and then that would be if they decided to surrender instead of relicense, then that would be part of their NOI that they would move forward with the commission with that process. Okay, go ahead, Allison.
We're coming to the end, don't you guys worry. We do have one last poll question that we'll bring up, and we did get a preview of this earlier on. Hopefully you've already forgotten the question, but we do want to know if you have ever filed comments through the Commission's e-filing system. You have 3 options. We'll give you a couple of moments to answer this question. All right. It's about 2/3 of our crew. That's great. About 75% have submitted comments through the e-filing system.
No, they haven't.
Have not. Oh my goodness, I read that totally wrong. My bad. Thank you. The correction. 75% have not.
So hopefully this is helpful to all of you.
Yes, exactly. So for those 25% or so of you who have submitted, this is hopefully just a review, but for those who have never done it, we hope that this kind of breaks it down and makes it a little bit easier just to understand. So the e-subscription, when you have subscribed to a project, this is the email that you will get. And as you can see, it says from FERC e-subscription. So at first you might not quite be sure what it is, but it is legitimate. You have signed up for it if you subscribe to it. It does tell you when it came from and then the date of when a document was either issued or submitted. And then down here at the bottom is the link that you would click. And the reason they send a link is so that you don't get like massive attachments in every email that ever comes to you. So this is the email, you'll click on the link, and then you have the option to open or save the document and then read through it and make notes as you so choose. So I wanted to make sure that you saw what that looked like. All right, now let's see. Why am I not advancing? There we go.
So now that we have gone through all of this information and thrown a lot of different terminologies at you and different websites, I just wanted to follow up with some of our guidance documents. This is an important one for stakeholders who are just getting involved in a couple projects. It's our Hydropower Licensing Get Involved Guide, and it's really just a refresher of everything that Allison and I just went over. It gives a background on the commission, gives a background on the licensing processes, and our electronic systems. So it's a great resource for like a quick reference guide on anything that we just talked about. So that's the first one. This is the link to our website. Allison showed you our website, and going to, so at the next slide, Allison, some other helpful links. Other helpful links include the hydropower page that Allison showed you. There's a lot of great information, both for licensing as well as for DHAC and even D2SI. So again, everything we talked about is covered. We've got sections on the webpage about that. Another resource that if you want more in-depth information, we've put together a Hydropower Primer, and it covers the history of hydropower, how hydropower works, different terminologies, as well as an overview of the commission and everything that Allison and I just talked about today. So if you want more in-depth information, I recommend checking out our Hydropower Primer. And then for post-licensing, so after we've issued a license and moved off to the Division of Hydropower Administration and Compliance, they have a compliance handbook. So if you want more information about anything that happens post-license, or if there are some complaints or anything that you might have, learning more about that process through the compliance handbook, I would recommend, and also going to their webpage. There are different ways to contact DHAC and get in touch with them if there are questions you have about an existing license and things that are happening at a project. So those are just some of the basic helpful links. Again, all of this information is on our website, and that is all we had. It was a lot of information, but hopefully it introduced you guys to some new things, and you learned how to use our website. If you have any additional questions, Alice and I are more than willing to answer them. But you're also feel free to email us, and we'll more than happy to find out answers for you.
Very much. Are there any additional questions?
I know there were a couple questions that put into the question and answer, so I hope I was able to address those. If not, please let me know. I can go in more detail if there's anything. And I think we addressed all the questions in the box. But again, we have this, and we're willing to answer anything. So let us know.
Great.
I think there was one question regarding land ownership. Does a hydropower company own the land in, underneath the water? I think that was one question. I can't find it. Okay, so one more question. If Brookfield Power has projects on a reservoir, do they have complete control and own the reservoir bottom, the air above the reservoir, and the water? This is stated to the people at South Maple Reservoir and Higley Flow Reservoir.
So the licensee has to be required that they have the rights to operate the project. So that usually means they have to have the rights or own the land and the water to operate the project. Not sure about the air. That one I'm not clear about. They would have to at least have some access to the land and water of the reservoir so that they could maintain and operate the project.
Okay, I'm familiar with easements, but I'm just not familiar with that.
I mean, there are licensees that actually own the land, so they would have a lot more control, but then there are other licensees that might not own all of the land in and around a reservoir. And then each state is also a little bit different on who owns the land under the water.
Thank you, Emily.
Well, if there's nothing else, I'd like to give a hearty thanks to Allison and Emily for helping us to understand this process about becoming a stakeholder and involved in the dam relicensing process. We appreciate your enthusiasm, your willingness to join us. This is really important. We've heard about this topic a couple of different times at our conferences, and we just hope we're getting the message out in all the different ways and all the different agencies that present on this. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for organizing this. This is great, and we really appreciate you having us.
Thanks. I learned a lot, and thank you to everybody that joined us today. This was recorded again, so look for it on our website. All right. Have a great
Thank you.
wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.